This conference will now be recorded.
November 18th, 2021 at 4:05. Clerk Armstrong, where are you? There you are. Can you please do roll call?
I'll start with the commissioners. Mayor DeHassen,
Present.
Vice Mayor Herbert,
Here.
Commissioner Cos,
Here.
Commissioner Pugh,
Here.
Commissioner Bichelot.
Here.
I'll now do the roll call for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Chair Mark Marsh,
Here.
Vice Chair Carey,
Here.
Member Hennigan,
Here.
Member Hutchins,
Here.
Member Kaczynski,
Here.
and I do believe we may have an alternate in the audience.
Not yet. Nope. Okay. All right. Would everybody please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, modifications to the agenda? Town manager, town clerk?
I do believe Neil may have wanted to mention something to the commission.
Yes, I don't remember if there was a resolution or discussion at the last town meeting about the item that came up at our last planning and zoning about the size of porches and covered patios on 18 Island, plans we looked at. And I know Rick presented it at the meeting as an item we were asking if we could take a look into it. Was there anything ever decided, any consensus?
I thought the consensus was that it would be against code to enclose it. So therefore, when they were in the process, even if it was at midnight, they'd be shut down the farm. Wasn't that what we said?
So-
Yeah, it was a code enforcement issue.
So I think he's looking to either, if you guys want to add it on the agenda as a discussion, or if you want to just have PNC look at it at a later
And bring
time.
back.
The latter.
Ladder. Any other additions, deletions,
So is that a consensus for later?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other additions, deletions, modifications, or side puts? All right, seeing none, I would ask for an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, that is a motion by Commissioner Pugh, a second by Commissioner Michelak. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Welcome, thank you public for coming, thank you all the board for coming on this kind of rainy day. I am going to try my best. Today I went to a meeting and they had somebody who followed our tour and she said she was an ankle biter. And I thought that that was a very interesting concept. So today I'm going to be your ankle biter because I'd like to get us out of here within 2 hours if at all possible. Huh?
2?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean.
You want to be the ankle biter?
Actually, I was turning my.
You be the ankle biter. Get us out in one.
Furthermore, I believe we are going to accept public comment at the beginning, but not during each agenda item. So when I invite the public, you can speak on an agenda item or a non-agenda item as you so desire. Just as a reminder, this is a workshop, so there are no decisions being made today. It is a time where we can have robust discussion within the sunshine laws with each body. So just keep that in mind. It's, you're not advocating one way or the other. The other thing I'd like for you to keep in mind is that we are all volunteers, right? Even us who make $100 a month, we give more than our fair share, and I think we all have the exact same goal in mind, is to maintain and preserve the character of our town. We all love our town, and so I just want you to keep that in mind. Nothing that is said today should be personal, and I'd like to hold it to that. So I'd now like to invite the public to make comment. Carrie, do you want Carrie?
You can do it right there. Yeah, do it from there. Do it from there, because he's gonna walk.
Well, yeah,
over there.
Thank you. Do we, it's not recorded, is it?
Yeah.
It is? Oh, it is recorded? I'm sorry, Terry.
Sucker punch.
I
I think I go to the first angle.
So you gotta go through the pain to get all the way up there to talk.
I just caused 30-second delay. That'd be nice.
I know. No good deal. Terry Brown, Harbor Drive South. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm gonna try to figure it out. But what I would say, based on just the comments that someone wants to review the powers and authority of the review commission, I don't think that we should encourage lawsuits, which is what's happening now. And I don't know if all of you are aware, I'm sure Mark Marsh is aware of a dude up in the town of Palm Beach that's taken a case all the way to the US Supreme Court because the Architectural Review Committee denied his application for a house because it didn't fit into that neighborhood, right? Am I right?
That's correct.
He got denied at the 11th Circuit, and it's going all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, he's got plenty of money, and the town of Palm Beach has plenty of money. We don't. So I think we need to look careful at the appeal process or the grievance process for an applicant. Because right now, they go to county court. They can sue and go to county court. Instead of having an internal grievance or appeal process where the applicant is taken care of internally in the town, in the municipal corporation. Ultimately, you can sue about anything at some point. But all I'm suggesting is that you have a setup where it goes back to the full commission and they make the final decision. Now, that's not the case, right?
It is the case.
It is the case. So I was mistaken about that. I don't know why this guy is suing. But you can get into litigation and it's going to be expensive.
Probably didn't like what the commissioner had to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Brown.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Just a clarification, I'm a planning and zoning alternate, so,
Well, hello.
sorry, my auto dealer had me hostage.
Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Roger Brenner.
Hi.
So I didn't know whether comments, I'm in the public category for comments, or I am in the planning and zoning category.
Good question.
That's a very good question. Clarification from our attorney?
If he's not serving, he's an alternate, then I would say your comments would fall into the public comment. If should someone have to leave and you then take on the role, then you would be part of the joint meeting.
Okay, that's what I suspect. Thank
You get a chance to.
Welcome.
you.
There you go.
Happy hour.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. I want to start by thanking the staff for the backup material for the history. It was very educational for me. I, like Mr. Brown, am kind of confused while we're here because in November of 2000, to give the history a little background here, in November of 2017, we instituted a concept development plan review, code 63-56. It was signed, it was voted on unanimously. It was signed by then Mayor Pugh and also Sitting Commissioner Mr. Haas. Then in June 2019, again passed unanimously, we turned around and kept the same concept review plan. We added an appeals process to it. We clarified a little bit about building height, and pretty much those were the major changes. But the big change was we actually then gave the Planning and Zoning Board the authority to approve, disapprove, or approve with changes or send back for additional work. And I'm presuming that that is what we are here probably mainly to discuss today. But again, that was signed by then sitting Mayor Cos, and Vice Mayor now Hurlbert was also a positive vote on that. So, you know, I don't disagree that every once in a while it's good to take a look at our policies and our procedures and see, are they working, are they not working? Everything kind of shifts with different things that happen. So, but at one point, we obviously thought that everything that we're doing was a pretty damn good idea. So I'm not, again, I'm kind of considering where we're here. But what I'd like to do is discuss what type of format we could have, particularly for item number 1. Is the format for discussion, is it best that we go through the ordinance as it defines the roles and responsibilities of the board and say whether or not we are still in agreement with that.
Yeah. If I could
Where would
speak.
you like to?
Madam Mayor, I think it would be good for us to go through and have a refresher. I think the reason to your question is that I think there's some misunderstanding of what the Planning and Zoning Commission are charged to do. I think when it started off, it was a little bit more, I wouldn't say reckless, but at least, didn't really know what the role was. I think I can speak for our current commission. I think they're a wonderful group of people. They're all skilled in their own right, but they seem to bring a very balanced approach to our commission. And I think it's serving the town well. But I think if I could ask you or ask staff to just refresh everybody about what the role of that, our commission is, that'd be, I think, very helpful. And then we can, have some kind of dialogue or discussion.
To expedite this, essentially, I'm looking at ordinance 2019-07, which was the most recent amendment to the concept development and review plan process. Under section 63-56A1 through 3C is outlined for public edification, what the actual role and responsibilities of this board are. So would that be sufficient enough for you to feel comfortable that that's a good review?
Yeah, I think it's, the page I have is just a page number, but the section that has the heading, the Planning and Zoning Commission should use the review criteria set forth here and to review site plans
Correct.
and then building results. Do you have that read by staff?
Yes, I guess my question to the group is, as it is being read though, because they're pretty distinct and they're pretty understandable, easy to digest.
Isn't there the one already written?
So let's, I think, I don't think we should go item by item. I think let's just
Okay.
refresh if it's okay with.
So actually, I have a great memory on this, but whether it was 2017 or 2019, I do not know. If you notice the ordinance, if you read it carefully, originally when it was proposed, it said shall on every single bullet point. We changed it to should on every single bullet point, except the last two. It's a huge difference. We went through this with the lawyer. The point was that the Architectural Review Committee of Plan Development Review would encourage people, but that issues of personal taste would not enter the equation. So that's why, I don't know if anybody was on the commission then, there was a big battle about this, about how much power and control. And under the attorney's direction, we went to the word should. In other words, you should do this, but it doesn't say you must do this. That's what it says legally. So, and we also get into encouraging people. So you guys would encourage people to do, let's say you didn't like the look of the house, you encourage them to do something. So the reason why that I wrote my memo up was because a resident came to me recently, I think it was July, the guy next door here. Okay, and I actually pulled up the lengthy meeting YouTube and listened to it. And that's why I actually had somebody transcribe it, and I apologize for the transcription. It's very difficult for the gentleman. And if you'll notice on page 2 at the bottom and at page 3 halfway through, we have P&Z, I don't know who on P&Z, and it doesn't matter, introduces the concept that they don't like the look of that house. They don't like the massing of that. They don't like a 5-car garage. And I believe it's Mark who notes that he had gone to staff and all that this gentleman had designed was within town code. He had a 21,000 square foot lot. So he has met all our code desires, but members of the review committee didn't like the look of that, which from my recollection was exactly what we were trying to avoid. Exactly what we were trying to avoid. It was a matter of the architectural review committee was formed because a couple guys got away with stuff. The guy down at Brendan Breeze's, one on the ocean, he hoodwinked the code enforcer. No,
Oh,
no,
the trouble
across the
was
street.
5001, 5003.
Yeah.
We also had a former mayor threaten to sue the town if we did not approve it.
And then
Let's be real clear
the
about-
Triangle House,
Pyramid.
pyramid, that's what you want to call it. Okay, that guy started his house in 2015. So as his house emerged, that's when everyone got a little tense, like what the hell's going on here? So my point is that since that time, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you'll know this better than I do, there are codes in place that would not allow these things to happen again. Like, for instance, not having a window on an entire wall, two-story wall.
So I think that you have set the foundation for understanding why we are here. and
Right.
I appreciate that. I'd like to your point, Chair Marsh, go back and just read these 10 or 12 things very quickly, because that will speak to, I believe, what you're also.
I'd like to come back.
Well, and before Chair Marsh responds on this, I was not at that meeting. So I want to ask a couple of questions here because you're using that one particular case. They weren't denied. They basically were pushed off for a month. And
Which case you're talking, Triangle?
no, the one right next door, the one that you have the
No, no, I
transcript
know
from.
the outcome.
So
But
it-
when I listened to it, that's when I said, well, wait a minute, this interjection of personal taste was what we were trying to avoid.
But you used the word massing when you said, when you were explaining, correct. Massing is one of the things we're supposed to look at. That's the compatibility with the neighboring properties. Everything I think that was suggested to him, he did. I can't imagine that he's not happy that the house is 7 more feet off the road. Again, he got approved the very next month.
Since I was maybe the culprit, the
No,
original.
no one's a culprit.
No, I mean, I had the most vocal response to the project. The house was not a good design by any, and it couldn't be defined in terms of a style. It was a very eclectic house. The massing was not appropriate or proportional to what, and it was just basic items that we suggested, as Penny rightly said. We deferred it purposely because the applicant was responding to some of our recommendations. And hence, when he went away, reviewed it, he came back with a project that was 100% better.
Did he reduce the garage?
Pardon?
Did he?
No.
No, good.
So,
Okay,
it wasn't a matter of us saying you can't do this or being very rigid. It was a discussion that was saying something is not correct here. You know, not everybody is trained, but what we're saying to them is this is, as it stands, did not meet basic criteria.
but it met town criteria for town
There is
staff.
no town criteria. I think that's, well, this may be a good time to look at the.
Yes, yes.
Town criteria can't just be metrics.
It's,
You're gonna end up with a house that looks like
My
a shoe.
shoe, all right, but put yourself in that guy's
Or
shoes,
pyramid.
right? Let's put yourself in that guy's shoes. You suggest to him that, hey, I don't like the roof slope, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that. What do you think he's going to do? He doesn't want to be delayed any further while his construction loans are running.
where is
Of course
he now?
What?
Where is he now?
Not complaining now.
No, he's approved.
I know, but he hasn't started construction or anything.
I
Yeah,
think this is a legal intent.
well, the problem is he couldn't commit. It was at his personal house. He said it was for his parents, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. And then it came out, it was basically a speculative project.
I mean, I'll ask another
That
simple
wouldn't
question.
question it.
Why does everything have to get resolved at one meeting? That's not a requirement anywhere.
I don't know what you mean.
We asked him to make some changes. He went home, came back, and it got approved again.
And he was
There's nothing in here that says everything has to be done the first time you show up. That's his only
But there's
gripe.
also nothing in it that says he had to make the changes that you
They
want.
didn't say he had to, I was at that meeting.
We deferred it.
Didn't, wasn't that a split vote?
Suggestions.
Didn't we just have 4?
It was 2-2, and it
So it didn't pass.
didn't pass.
It didn't pass.
Can I,
What I
My
Wait,
recommendation to defer it, because we didn't want to deny, fair
No, you
enough.
guys, everybody was very clear.
This is a discussion that we have now jumped back down into the weeds. Can we bring it back up and elevate it a little bit more to the at least 10,000 foot level, if not the 30,000 foot level? And I
I'm up somewhere in
Yeah.
I agree, but it is part and parcel of the discussion. It's a prime
Of
example.
all the houses that you have looked at in the past since 2017, I can't imagine this is the only example.
I don't think anything's been
I
denied.
mean, I'll ask another question. This is a house that we deferred. We deferred one at the last meeting. How many of the members of this planning and zoning have voted to pass a house that to them was distasteful? I can say I have.
We've been very reasonable.
It's not personal.
That's not the issue.
It's not personal space by any means. Right in here, in these little, in A, B, and C, we're talking about harmony, that's right here, harmony and architecture, that's not so hard. Height and scale, that's something that's right here in the original.
Is it sugar
Pigment
shell?
colors, representative architectural style, and architectural style and elements need to be consistent. One of the problems in here was a conference about what was the architectural style. So that absolutely was opposite of what it says it should be here.
Right, but.
And the gentleman went for it easily.
There was no.
He didn't complain.
Can I interject
You don't
something?
hear the other side of the story.
Yes.
I think we're getting way kind of into the weeds a little bit. But I think the beginning of the Architectural Review Committee, which you and I literally sat down inside that conference room and talked about, very first, we need to do something. What we did, we came up with a plan that we should have, at least have a citizens review committee be able to review it and suggest, hey, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. I think the actual crux of the matter here is, should the Planning and Zoning Commission have the power to deny a permit? And I think really that's the issue here. Whether you guys come up with stuff, which I think some of the stuff has really been, really good. But to be able to deny or accept a plan, the power, when you gave the power to the planning and zoning is when things started going a little bit sideways. Okay,
May
but there is power.
I-
There is power, because what happens is when you're able to deny a permit or you deny the way that somebody wants to build things, then what happens is you're taking out of the building department's hands.
And that's stuff, and Steve just mentioned 2 projects. So under your theory, those could still be built today.
Under my theory, which was our theory first, Mark, so don't make it just my theory.
No, no.
It was our theory first, where we were going to have a review committee review it because Manny was not looking at all the details. So let's be clear on that. Now, after I left and you guys got together and you had the decision, you wanted to give the power to the Planning and Zoning Committee to now deny an applicant because of what it looks like. That's where the problem arises. That's in my opinion. Okay, that's all it is. My opinion is I think that's where the problem arises. Now, if the commissioners and everybody wants to keep that as part of the deal, that is a vote.
For the public here and everybody else, if this commission denies a project, it can be appealed.
I agree. I understand that.
It's not a
But-
matter of that, we're just expressing whether unanimously or.
But you still have the power to deny the project. And once you deny the project, yes. Once you deny a project, you put another hurdle for that homeowner who has to now come back. And they're not gonna, you think that most homeowners are gonna say, well, we got denied, we're gonna redo it to what we want. So we need to get our permit out, but we need to get the house built, especially if it's a builder building a spec house. I'm just making the point that I think where everything went a little bit sideways is when the power was given to the planning and zoning. That's all I'm saying. That is my view of what has happened since we started doing this. That's it.
Can I ask a question? When you say things went sideways, in sideways, you mean complaints and contractors and builders and homeowners not happy, right?
That's correct.
Well, I personally feel that part of the complaint issue comes from us never having any precise definition of what we could and could not do. We would sit up there and say, well, we kind of think you should or you shouldn't, but we didn't have a right to do anything. We didn't have the authority. We didn't have the power in your term. I think that people are frustrated when they don't have direction. There's not another municipality that doesn't have this, and there's not another, people know when they have to abide by certain codes, and that our building official is looking at things now and really identifying all the right things, and then planning and zoning or the DPR has this criteria that they have to meet, at least they know.
Okay, well
And they
then, to
can
your
do
point
it.
then, Penny, if they have the criteria, what is the criteria? You said it twice now. Codes. So most of the criteria that come before the planning and zoning, and most of those plans come through plan and zoning, are within the code. Okay, so what happens is when you may have a
That's not exactly
recommendation
true.
of where the window should be on a face of the building, that's not code. Okay, but code is how many windows can be on that building.
That's why we have to.
That's
But
why you
that's-
have a lead
that's the
architect in
point
the
I'm trying to make.
community as the head of planning and zoning, because he is trained in this. I'm not.
Everybody.
So
You're
Mark,
not.
Mark leaves, so none of you are trained in that, which, if he's not gonna be here forever, then what? So you have no point, you have no direction when he leaves? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying,
Every
but
municipality, coastal town has a planning, zoning, or architectural review board, ARPP, ARCOM, whatever you want to call it. And this town didn't. We
right.
suffered because of the, again, some of the examples that Steve brought up. And it's not a power. You can't define by code an aesthetic. Okay? Nobody here, I'm speaking for the commission, and I'll ask them to speak, wants to redesign anybody's project.
Correct.
It's just an appropriateness of whether this criteria that we're going to read out, are they meeting the intent of that? There's nothing written shall or anything, it's intent. That's a key
No.
word.
There's only two criteria, and they're right there in writing, number 7 and number 8. That's the only authority that was given to P&Z during that commission meeting. The rest
7
of
and 8.
those were encouragement. 1 through 6 all have the word should. 7 and 8 are the ones
Well-
that you guys have the authority to deny something for. And I think that it sort of leaked into this, we encourage you to do this. And I think the other thing is, I don't think you guys are in the shoes of the homeowner sitting in front of you.
I was. I've just been through 3 renovations.
How, did you recuse yourself?
Not, I wasn't on the, I didn't have anything that had to come before the P and Z.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
Are you kidding?
No kidding. I'm kidding. Yes, I'm kidding.
I'm hoping. Okay. I'm gonna bite some heels and go back, and please, Clerk Armstrong, will you start to read on ordinance 2019-07, section 63-56, number, starting with A, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall use the review criteria as set forth herein when reviewing site plans. Number 1.
Madam Mayor, can I just read off the section of the code of what was codified? Because there might have been one more addition after that, one more change. So I prefer to go off the code of what is codified because it's up to date and it has everything in it.
Sure.
So I'm gonna read section 63-56 in the code. Number 1, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall use the review criteria as set forth herein when reviewing site plans. A, relationship of site to building. Section 1.
Can you put this up on the screen at the same time?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm asking for the public.
Oh.
Thank you.
What?
Subsection 1, the site should be planned to accomplish a desirable transition with the streetscape. The overall balance and proportion of the proposed building will be considered. Subsection 2, the height and scale of each building should be compatible with its site and other buildings on site. B, relationship of building and site to adjoining areas. Subsection A, buildings should be designed to enhance the surrounding neighborhood. 2, harmony in architectural style, form, texture, mass, and line, as well as materials, colors, and use of architectural elements should be provided in the design of all buildings. 3, buildings should be consistent with the established neighborhood character or within acknowledged architectural styles. 4, the height and scale of the proposed structures should be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. C, building design. 1, elevation of a project should be based on quality of its design and relationship to its surroundings. 2, components such as roofs, windows, doors, eaves, and parapets should have balanced proportion in relationship to one another. 3, colors should be harmonious and representative of the architectural style of the building and generally within the character of the neighborhood. 4, design attention should be given to the mechanical equipment or other utility hardware on roofs, buildings, and at grade so as to screen them from off-site view. 5, buildings should be of a size as to be in harmony with the permanent neighboring development or with an acknowledged architectural style. 6, use of any/all of the above preferred design elements in conjunction with their renovation or addition to existing home is encouraged, along with the removal of any existing element that is not preferred. 7, the architectural style and elements of proposed additions and renovations shall be consistent with the other portions of the building. 8, all proposed structures shall be consistent with the town's land development regulations and goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Could you just read subsection C so people can hear what the appeal process is?
Where,
Number 3.
Number 3C.
Following the development plan review hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall approve, deny, approve with conditions, or request additional information in order to make a determination that the proposal is compliant with the above criteria. Written notice of appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission decision to the Town Commission shall be made within 30 calendar days of the date such decision is rendered and shall be filed with the town clerk. Those property owners within 300 feet of the perimeter of subject property shall have the right to appeal the Planning and Zoning Commission decision to the Town Commission in accordance with the time frame set forth herein. Such appeal shall be heard and considered by the Town Commission at its next available meeting.
Mayor DeHassett?
Yes.
Can I interject something? Because we seem to have a discussion over should and shall. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Should is the past tense of shall. Use an auxiliary function to express obligation, propriety, or expediency. Use an auxiliary function to express futurity from a point of view in the past. Use an auxiliary function to express what is probable or expected. Use an auxiliary function to express a request in a polite manner or to soften direct statement. So should is the past tense of shall.
in
So-
the vernacular, okay, I agree with that, but this was done with the lawyer who came after Brian Shute. And maybe the current lawyer can say the difference, the legal difference between shall and should, particularly given the fact that number 6 says use of any all of the above preferred design elements in conjunction with the renovation or addition to existing home is encouraged. So
Okay.
legally, we're looking at the word should as basically you're encouraged to do this. And maybe the lawyer can,
So the should and shall don't really matter.
I think,
It's the
I
word
think it should be
encouraged.
the other
the
way around.
encouragement is the shoulds. We encourage you to do this.
Should is past tense, shall is
Do it.
do it.
It's a, right, correct. More
Right.
definitive,
Present.
that's all. And
Present.
that's why this was done, Patty. I don't know, were you with these meetings when we did this? Holy
I
moly.
was- I wasn't
anybody
with-
else at these meetings?
I wasn't with an attorney for sure.
What?
I wasn't with an attorney for sure.
No, attorney chimed in on should and shall.
No.
I just barely remember that and
I
I
don't
was here.
remember.
Anyway, that's what I thought the intent was.
Wait,
If I'm wrong, we can end this meeting really fast.
So what I'd like to do is to call on Attorney Godot, please. Can you weigh in on should and shall, and then Mr.
It's
Brother
Gosh,
just
it's the
inform me
definition
of
of is.
a new ruling that
was the
based
whole
on the basic we talked about earlier, so.
Well,
Are we
you
split
know,
hairs here?
once we start referring to dictionary definitions, I think we could all debate, should and shall. We can debate may and shall as well, but what I tend to focus on is the beginning of this section of the first paragraph. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall use the review criteria set forth herein when reviewing site plans. So they have to look at this criteria. It's a quasi judicial hearing, so this is the criteria that they have to apply to the development. What was just read in subsection 3 is that following their review, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall approve, deny, or approve with conditions or request additional information in order to make a determination that the proposal is compliant with the above criteria. So looking at it from a legal perspective in a quasi judicial hearing, this is your criteria. And they have to make sure it's compliant with it. So some of the criteria, we can argue, is it mandatory or is it more of an encouragement? I don't know that it really matters as long as there's substantial competent evidence that supports each of the criteria. And if a board member feels that there's not substantial competent evidence to support that criteria, then that can be their position to say, I think we need this element or whatever it is to be modified this way. So then there is in this development substantial competent evidence that supports that criteria. So from a legal standpoint, that's what I'm looking for. So if it ever does get challenged beyond the town commission, the board's decision has that evidence to support whatever way it decided. Now, people can differ on substantial competent evidence. It just has to, the evidence just has to exist. And that ultimately is the decision a board member will have to make.
Are there any other qualifications besides competent substantial evidence that is necessary when you're in a quasi judicial hearing? Just from a legal point of view, I mean, obviously everybody gets sworn in. I mean, if there's clarification that's needed for what type of hearing that is, I'd be willing to have the attorney explain that, but I think we all kind of know.
You don't have the same, if you're talking about, you don't really have like the same burden of proof like you would have in a criminal case of beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence just has to exist, and what the courts have said is reasonable people can differ on that evidence. But as long as that substantial competent evidence is present and supports the decision, it should be upheld on appeal.
Question. Has anybody ever, since you guys started the denial process and approval process, appealed it to the town commission since you guys have been on the?
No.
No. And they have the ability to do that, right? So.
We've had deferrals.
And they've never.
Asked for additional information. There's never been a denied project.
Never.
Because I think one of the, I understand where Steve's point is as far as the power is concerned, and the way that you're looking at it at a very factual,
Right.
Straight down the line. This is our code. What can you do with that code? The Planning and Zoning Commission, the way that I understand the Planning and Zoning Commission, and having attended many of their meetings, which I highly encourage you to do, because you actually see them in action and how their interaction is and what they're looking at. It gives you a much better feeling as to what they're actually doing. The way that I see their function is they go past the book. The book is Durrani. Durrani will look at the book and he will go, okay, this is X and this is Y and this is here and this is there. They are looking at the entire picture. Does this make sense? Does this look good in the street? He cannot do that. He can only look at the book. Is there 5 windows in the front or not? Requires 5 windows. There is 5 windows. Check, done. They're looking at it. Are those windows compatible with the rest of the neighborhood? Are those windows in the right places? Are they, does it make sense the way that they're looking at it?
But back with the lawyer, so now you're down to individual opinions.
You're looking at
which I thought
5
we were
individual.
trying to avoid.
Yeah.
If we're not trying to
No.
avoid that, fine.
And I don't think again, the Planning and Zoning Commission, their function is to actually put some stamp of, does this make sense in a general term, in an individual position? But you have 5 individuals. That's why it's a citizens committee. It's 5 individuals that are looking at this, and 5 individuals, at least 3 of them have to come to the conclusion, yeah, this is okay, or hell no. And by our codes today, when we look at our codes are not sturdy enough that we can avoid things like the parking garage. We might avoid the parking garage today, but there will be other things that are constantly challenged, and they're looking at this and they're going like, wait a second, there's a problem. Let's just put a pin in this and let's try to get them to work around it. So we don't have things that might be available by our code, but really shouldn't be in the neighborhood.
I understand what you're saying, but I just can't believe legally. Let's say somebody decides, well, you actually brought it up. Last meeting or the meeting before, it was a great concept, a great idea. So you guys made an elevation for a 1-story house and a 2-story house, remember that? We just did this, right?
Yes.
And Martin said this great point. So let's pretend that we just wrote the thing as it was written. 1-story house has to be, what was it, 12 feet, 14 feet?
Tie beam, you know, we think we raised the tie beam.
And then the 2-story house was what?
24.
24.
You're talking about with a flat roof?
Yeah.
No, tie beam, to the tie beam.
Right.
But
And
it's
Martin
just-
so let's say the guy brings you a house and it's 2 stories tall, but it's a 1-story house. And you guys go, wait a minute.
Not a 2-story house.
Right, so he could make a box. I thought it was a brilliant point. There's nothing in there that says that guy can't just make a giant 22-story.
It's a single
22.
story, it has maximum 14 feet, so you can't go any higher.
No, why can't he go up 2 stories and just have gigantic ceiling?
Because it's a 1-story house.
Because the tie beam
Then
has to
put
be
a
a
staircase with a little lock.
The tie beam has to be at 14, right?
We would catch that because that would become apparent on the
Of
document.
course.
We had this with the use of flat roofs. People wanted to, have.
Yeah.
You know,
I get you.
alternate area for recreation.
Right. But why would you care? That's
But
my
if you
point.
still have the power, because the power's still in your hands, it just takes them an extra 30 days. And you and I both know that in any municipality, most municipalities, they don't get through in one hearing. So if you still have the power to accept or reject, what are we talking
Okay,
about
so
here?
instead of this thing dragging on, I seem to be the only person here, perhaps with a little support from Jeff, who wants to take a look at a reduction or going to the letter of the power that I see in here.
Absolutely not.
Right? No one wants to discuss it.
Let me just point out one thing, in fact,
I think we're discussing.
I mean, no one wants to discuss it further.
And Steve, I see your point. I just see what they're doing. And when you actually look at what they're doing, is they're doing us a favor because they're catching those things. To the point with the 2-story, I personally, I cannot see, out of the 10 people here, I cannot see a reason why there should not be a 24-foot to tie beam, single-story house allowed.
Exactly.
If it doesn't look like a shoebox. Now, if it looks like a shoebox, Mark's gonna throw it in my face and go like, get out.
Well, that's all about penetration in your favor.
Because that's what he should be doing.
Glad you're learning.
Okay, so no one wants to discuss that.
But I would
That's
speak
fine.
about to the town commission.
Yep.
Couple of things.
Well,
Um,
shoe,
I think there's
good.
one
No,
word
shoe.
missing in this section 3. I think somehow we should add deferral. You know, it says zoning commission shall approve, deny,
Right.
and approve. I think we should have the word deferral or defer. I
You
don't know
want
why
time
it's
limit
not
for deferral? Time limit? The homeowner's calling me, don't call you. They call me and go, they're spending, $10,000 in interest, $10,000 in interest.
My other point is, because I do this in a number of towns. business-wise. We have had application, quality of applications we have here submitted to the staff for our review exceeds even Palm Beach. So people are actually responding in a positive fashion. I mean, the quality of the application, and I'm sure some of the board members remember, we had a 2-page kind of doodles. But now we,
Did you approve?
in fact, we're actually staff to pare it down a little bit because we don't need to see
Yeah.
all the technical, critical, zoning or coding.
Okay, so I guess as a citizen, I guess I'm a commissioner as well, I would just ask that you recognize in yourself when your personal opinion is coming into it. Maybe that would be the way to end that conversation. And I can move to point 2. Do you have any problem with Durrani okaying a simple house plan rather than calling the architecture review
Yes.
committee?
Yes,
I do.
Because-
And somebody brought it up.
Mhm.
We are all volunteers.
Yeah.
Unpaid. So the town has the benefit of having us volunteer our professional judgment and not burden the building department, because I'm sure, there's a budget issue somewhere along that line.
Right.
Well, Durrani, and it was mentioned Manny, Jeff and I go back long enough. Manny was an inspector basically. And he was put in the role of making zoning decisions.
Don't even talk about it on.
So,
But I'm just saying, I don't think, Ronnie, I'd like to express the commission to voice their opinion. I don't think we want staff to do that, the more aesthetic.
And staff
well,
legally
all right,
cannot do it.
let's
There
take-
is a state statute against it.
let's take a Steve Bargatt house on Spanish River, and then I think build a similar one on Harbor or something, right?
Sure.
So he comes to Durrani with his plans, and Durrani knows that this is okay, so he has the ability to do that. If he has a question, a concern, or a problem with it, then he calls a meeting of the.
Let me share with you, I've been asked by staff to come and give an opinion. Just one-on-one. And it's worked out well. If it's straightforward, Durrani can handle it. But if not, it has to come.
So that process is already in place?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's
Durrani,
good.
would you agree?
Yes, good evening. Yes, that happens from time to time.
Yeah, but then that defeat the purpose of having the architecture review committee?
No, it's just to see if it would be necessary to go to the PZ.
But isn't that the process though? If I come in with a new house plan, does it automatically go to P and Z to look at?
Well, it has to go to PZ.
Right.
But if the applicant has not responded, and he's now submitting a building permit, which overlooks some of the items that were discussed or part of the approval, then that's when he says, this window height is not what was discussed in the meeting. So he's a safety net.
No, I agree with it, to be honest with you. Is there a cost to the, if you appeal to the commission?
I believe there's is there not a $1,500 appeal charge?
See, that's, do you
To the
think it's a little
commission?
onerous? So if I want to appeal the decision of planning and zoning, I have to
So
pay
then-
$1,500 to get to the
That's right,
commission?
I mean,
Yeah, we're gonna pull up the fee schedule.
All right. You see what I'm saying?
Part of it has to do with publicizing it as a public meeting. And I think we went through this at the last commission meeting, did we not?
Yeah.
Talked about the rationale as to why, but.
Why the
please-
fees are so high.
Please do split up.
So a position of a planning and zoning commission, it is 1,500.
Because it has to be advertised,
I don't
has
know
to
if I
be
agree with
faked, it has to be all kinds of things.
Yeah, I know, but if you're paying an exorbitant permit fee,
It's not part of the permit.
well, I'm
fee
saying it
goes
should be,
for-
if you're having to go through your architecture review committee and you're paying the fee,
$1,500.
and you got down, pay another $1,500 because you have to go, yes, it might
Wait,
be
was there,
pennies compared to permit.
was there
Can I-
extra
can I
money
ask
to
you
go
a-
before?
I'd like to have a question.
Hold on. Sorry.
I just think that maybe the fee might be dissuading people from maybe doing it. I know they're paying a lot of money. I know when you hear that, hey, they got all these millions of dollars to build the house, what's another $1,500? I get
believe
that.
it came up at the last commission meeting because it was a board of adjustments fee also. So that was the discussion, and I think the discussion, I thought, ended up that while it is an additional monetary burden, that it is one that the applicant was willing to do to obviously get the end result that they wanted. If we want to take a look at it,
I think we should.
and potentially do a partial refund if the commission, if their appeal is approved, there's something that we could take a look at that way. Again, I think the rationale was, though, if you're building a $4 to $5 million home and you just pay $2 million for the dirt, $1,500 is really not a big.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, everybody has their push point where they say, you know what, enough's enough. right? So, I mean, I think though, to cut it
I
down,
asked a question.
I think we should just look at it, maybe bring it up and look at it, that's all.
I'll repeat it.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Neil,
We'll look at it.
Neil, the question was, how do we compare to other municipalities? And I think we were below the other.
What do you mean by below?
Cost of permitting.
The permit costs or re-review costs or whatever. So we're not out of order in terms of that.
So what Jeff is saying is if we, as a development review committee, reject something, they can appeal it for $1,500. Is that, okay, so I don't remember us rejecting anybody. We've deferred them, which there's no cost
Yes,
involved.
there's cost to the homeowner.
And they've never reviewed one. I just think this is a problem that's
And
not,
and let me say, on
hasn't risen to the
deferrals,
level of problem.
No, there's a cost to the homeowner in their financial.
Or the develop, and we don't
Well,
want to, we definitely want to avoid problems. But
Which
we
is-
also now have a new checklist that has been developed by staff that should largely, I think, I've gone through it a few times, should streamline things and maybe avoid some of these problems. I can't say it will, but it should.
if I could give you an example, I'm going to Arcon myself tomorrow. Which is never pleasant. There is an applicant there that's been deferred 7 times. Okay, because they're trying to work with the applicant to not deny it and put it in to, at Goose Point. You brought up the Palm Beach.
Terry Brown.
Oh, Terry. And I know that very well. I thought you would. But, so I think to David's point is we've been deferring and the response has been very positive so far. You know, it's, excuse me, they've not maybe addressed 100% of the concerns, but they've gone far enough for the commission to feel the intent is sufficient.
Okay, so we don't want to discuss that any further, but I just will leave you with one thought. Why do you think they do that? So you don't get the phone calls I get from the builders,
But
from the residents. They're doing that because they're trying to get their home built. Anyway, end of that discussion. You don't want the Ronnie to be able to okay simple house plans. End of that discussion. Point number 3, since I'm batting so well here. And this one I won't lose, because the lawyer's here, thank God. The lawyer before you, Pam, right? I remember having this conversation, it happened both privately and publicly, about commissioners attending P&Z meetings. Pam frowned on it. She didn't even like the idea of commissioners attending P&Z meetings because you're the appeal board. The commission is the appeal board if they come to appeal. And Pam absolutely forbade commissioners from speaking at P&Z meetings. Now, in this July 7th meeting, a P&Z, a commission member came there and spoke openly and agreed with you two on the massing in the garage, et cetera, et cetera. So if this guy now comes to us to appeal, that was the attorney's worst case scenario.
Let
Because
me
now-
stop you there because I was the one.
Well, wait, I'm not asking you, I'm asking Christy Godot.
Let me just make sure, because if you read the transcript.
Yep.
I did not speak for or against or in favor of anything. I simply suggested that what the Planning and Zoning Commission might want to do is let the applicant know, because of the concern that they expressed about massing, that we had a pending thing about the flat roofs, and it looked like that the style that they were going through was a contemporary style that would much better be served with a flat roof. That
I don't
that would
disagree with you,
actually,
but I
and
just-
because of there was pending litigation, and because they are not building this immediately, if you read this very carefully, I did not speak in favor or against or anything. I simply wanted them to, hey, why don't you tell them, if you wait a little bit, there might be a change in our ordinances and this would be addressed then.
Okay, I disagree with that last statement because and then I'm not tagging anybody. You said the opportunity to actually scale it even further down, thus alleviating.
I'm not sure you're talking about the same house.
Yeah, we are,
Yeah.
for sure.
The-
But Christy, can you please, once and for all, can an attorney, give a ruling to the town commission about going to P&Z? And what they can do if they do attend P&Z?
think what you're addressing is the concern that if a decision of.
Can you
planning-
speak up, please?
Yes, if a decision of planning and zoning gets appealed to the town commission, then the question becomes, as a town commissioner, can you sit there and decide the matter based on the facts? What you don't have in your code and what some cities have in their code is very detailed procedures on an appeal of a planning and zoning to the town commission. It's not clear from your code if that's truly just an appeal, so it's based on the record from planning and zoning, or if it's a whole new hearing before you. If it was a whole new hearing before the town commission, you'd be sitting in a quasi-judicial type of situation. In a quasi-judicial position, you must be impartial. So I think what you're pointing out, and probably the concern that Pamela Ryan had, is if you show up at planning and zoning and you advocate for one side or the other, and it gets appealed to you, and this commission is, the town commission is sitting in a quasi-judicial hearing, there's a concern that that commissioner is no longer impartial and has made a predetermination of the development before it came before the town commission. What I would ask is, it's not clear from your code if the hearing is truly quasi-judicial or more of an administrative review of the record made below. But you're absolutely right. To take the best approach is to be conservative and not have town commissioners advocating one way or the other before a planning and zoning commission. That way you avoid that entire issue.
And you're also influencing the applicant, because the applicant now says to himself, well, if I go to appeal, I already know there's one commissioner that's going to vote against me.
I actually, you and I are gonna pass this together. I agree with you. But I don't believe, I believe that attendance to the meeting, so you can hear the details of how they got to their decision and why they got to their decision, is very important. And actually it is, so I would agree with you partially and disagree with you on the other side, because, you know, it could lead to a recusal, it could lead to undue influence, you know.
Right.
I get that, but the best way to understand how this board reached something is to actually be there present, see the presentation, see the rolling of the eyes, the tapping of the feet, the banging of the head, you know, whatever the case may be.
Well, Pamela disagreed on that point, but if we now will just say that, you know, commissioners attending the meeting should not speak.
Shall not.
Shall not. Must not.
When I spoke with both Pam and Brian before attending any of the meetings, I would give them the go ahead. It's a good way to learn what's
Well,
going on.
Pam,
Okay, she never said to me.
Pam frowned.
I'm gonna check.
And just, again, just to clarify on that particular meeting, I agree also that a commissioner that attends that meeting should not speak out for or against a project. And that is not what I did at that meeting.
No,
was
it's
very-
unfortunate that you were the person there speaking, that's all. That's the only.
No,
reason.
I was simply trying to point out that they should probably advise them that this might become an.
Gotcha.
And it was not, I was not in favor or against that
That was a
project.
good point. because
So what, it
somebody's
was
coming up with
simply-
savings and such.
Christine, we just decide commissioners don't speak.
We are not deciding anything. We are going to suggest that maybe staff take a look at it and our attorney take a look at it, and it could be brought forth potentially as a change to our code or a resolution, maybe going forward.
But I think it also should be limited to those, the DPR purview, not necessarily P and Z, because like when we're talking about flat roofs in general and ordinances and code changes, it's good.
There isn't an applicant at those meetings. There's not an applicant at the P and Z meeting. So
And
yes,
she's
I
agreeing with me. She's saying
I-
elementary.
Right.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, but allow them to speak at a basic planning and zoning where it's not an applicant.
I don't think a commission should attend any planning and zoning commission meeting, because it makes you completely impartial, completely. Yes, you can see what they're saying, you can see everybody saying, well, how they got there, but the point of the commission is when there is unless, maybe I'll revise that. If the planning and zoning was just talking about a house, approving a house, you wanted to see how they talked about approving a house. But if they were speaking about something that the commission sent down to them to look at and talk about and then bring back to the commission, how can you be impartial when you listen to all the different things? You may have already made a decision before you're sitting up here and you hear the information come from the planning and zoning. So you're kind of making this, you're going to make a decision before you even hear what the planning and zoning has to say when they come up back to the commission.
I think that's a wrong assumption. I think it's gathering information. Notice that
I
you
see,
should
I
be
just-
making government.
That's like a judge going inside of the jury room and then figuring out, oh, no, I just disagree.
But
That's
you have
all.
a chance.
I can disagree with you,
on that one.
Susan. I mean,
Of
I'm
course,
just saying, I've never, ever attended a planning and zoning commission. And the reason being, because I always thought when I've let them do their work. And then when they came back to the commission, they presented what their work was, and that's how I made my decision. I didn't need to hear all the ways how to get to the decision, because I trusted the people that are on the planning and zoning to make the right decision. And that's why we have those people on the planning and
I
zoning.
trust me too, but I want to hear. It's information.
Well, that's the whole point when they come back to the commission. So it's just a disagreement. I mean, I can disagree with you, Susan, for crying out loud. Okay, you're gonna, believe me, you can attend all the ones you want. I don't really care. But I'm saying it, I don't attend them because I think that it really is gonna skew my way of making a decision.
It's kind of ironic, because everything's on
Yeah.
audio now.
What's
Yeah,
next?
you can
In
listen
Europe,
to
it
it.
is-
But I tell you this, and this happened to me on the last workshop meeting that we had, when I went through the material and there were several items on there. And I remember the discussions that they had, because I attended those meetings. I remember how they reached that discussion when this was packaged and it came to us. And I disagreed with them then. And I still disagreed with them on the package. I understood where they were coming from. I still disagreed.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying. You made the decision already.
It just, you still make your decision based on the information that you feel is the right information. But I understand how they got there.
Okay,
I don't
go
wanna-
back up and not as in that. I had one other, yes. Mr. Turner.
I'm not a lawyer. And,
Thank you.
you know,
No offense.
but I was interested in this shall and should controversy because I've been on 3 condominium boards. I still serve on 2 of them. And we encountered what we discovered, which I just looked up again, is before about 2010, the distinction that you made was accepted by most lawyers. But since 2010, even the Supreme Court says shall is no longer must. And shall and should are, I'll just read you 3 sentences, okay? It says, we call must and must not words of obligation. Must and must not are the only words you can say something is prohibited. Nearly every jurisdiction, legal court, state, local, I tell the word shall is confusing because it can also mean may, will, or must. Federal rules of civil procedure no longer use the word shall, even since the Supreme Court ruled that when the word shall appears in statutes, it means may, and therefore the Federal Register now requires them to change everything where it says shall to must. So I would just suggest that to avoid getting into future controversies, I understand exactly what you thought you were doing, but.
Well, actually,
So you got legal
panel
opinion.
was screwed.
You got
Feel
legal
bad
opinion.
legal about it.
I'm just saying that you
Right.
probably
Pretty
want to
much.
say must and then do the softening that you would like with other language about whether the architecture is, complies or whatever. But it turns out the shall versus should controversy isn't a controversy, they're both weak.
Okay.
That's
That's good.
I said
Pretty
the
hard.
article-
To the essence.
I sent the article to Congress so she can circulate it.
Number 3, I'm definitely against.
I only had one other,
Where's your ankle biting?
You know, we're literally
I only had one
2
other
minutes,
small
1:02.
small,
1 hour and
point
2.
that I wanted to ask staff. In reading through this, I noticed that there is a notice to be posted on the website is 15 days prior. The notice to be actually posted on the property through a placard is 15 days prior. Yet the written notification to surrounding residents is 20 days. And I was just going to look for clarification as to why there's not 15 days across the board.
Well, just keep in mind, you also we have to mail it out, so it may take account into mailing time. So I wasn't there when it was decided, but it may take into account mailing. Because that's just
5
mailing
days to
them to
mail.
each individual house. Mhm.
5 to 50 days to mail.
And staff was also, just to go through what we have discussed, staff was also going to look at adding the word potentially defer
So
to.
I was gonna ask Christie, because Christie, in that section 3, it says, or request additional information. Do we need to add the word defer, or would that, because they can ask for additional information with that word?
We can certainly add it. I mean, technically, we can add it. Defer.
The universal term for postponement.
All right.
UBC.
Let me look at the dictionary.
Yeah, no more dictionaries.
Okay, no more. Sorry.
Okay, we
I
are going to
started.
now move on to architectural criteria for front elevation and more. This was brought forward by Commissioner Finnegan. Would you please fill us in on the second?
Yeah, I'm stepping into soft ground here, I think. A couple of times at our reviews and looking at the house that's known as the Pyramid and a couple of the houses in the community, I think we're sometimes lacking in what we're requiring on the side of a house that touches the street. We had an issue with the first house coming over the bridge on Ocean near the swamp there. And it was, I believe Mark was the one that identified that a lack of any sort of appeal for the house. It was just like a blank, almost a blank wall, had a few slit windows at the top. And that's never going to go away. That's the view coming into the town. Or a house that's on the end of a street, and obviously the house and the driveway is on a side street, but it's literally on 2 streets. I would like to see us expand this window door coverage or the solid wall concept to those cases.
So a corner lot, in other words?
So a corner lot, you'd have to at least have some architectural relief, whether it's windows or something
Yeah,
else.
so it's
I'm
not
not
just a
trying to
big
say what
stucco
it
wall.
is. Pardon?
So it's just not a big stucco wall going down the side, right?
We have a 6
Because
foot
you got
one
2
up.
neighbors.
Yeah, I got it.
You got to. And likewise, if you have the guest quarters, I don't know, Mark, what's the technical name for the houses that have a courtyard and then a place that goes over the driveway? That's like a
Mansion?
second- Pardon? A mansion, yeah, that's great. Pardon?
Like a portico?
Yeah,
Well,
port the share the port or whatever.
That's just a large porch. That could be actually on the front of your house, correct? I'm talking is.
We're talking the estate lots like in
Yes,
front
it's
here
very-
where
it's very
there's
common on the
2
estate
buildings.
lots.
The
Yeah.
main building.
Breezeway.
the
It's a
front.
breezeway.
A breezeway.
Breezeway is the.
Nothing here addresses that can't be just a blank wall that's now in the street.
But doesn't a breezeway have to be open?
That's why it's a
If
breeze.
Well,
if that's what you're thinking.
Well, I'm not. These are
These are
often
structures.
part of, they're like mother-in-law.
It's mother-in-law
quarters. Yeah.
So is that really a portico or?
No, that's not a portico.
No.
That's more of a breezeway or. Breezeway is a good, just.
But my point is that a house like that really has 2 fronts, one to the street and one within its own courtyard. And I think we're only addressing what's in the courtyard,
Like a carriage house.
the carriage house.
And quite a few of them are popping up in Gulfstream, so, and they're having. some-
Almost every new house in Gulfstream, or excuse me, in Manalapan has got that concept.
So you're
let's not
saying,
talk about it now, please.
No,
So what are you saying, to apply the same rules that apply to the currently? in the
that a house
code?
can have more than one front,
the front.
technically.
What if they build a wall? Then you're looking at the wall. A wall can only be
Just a
6 foot high.
wall at the front?
No, like the side, because we're talking about the side. So like you said, it's a good idea. When you come over to the fifth ring, you're looking at the house that ends at the natural area. And it's a blank, hard wall
Right.
on the house. But what if they build a wall? You're still looking at a wall. Well, it's only 6 foot high.
Well, I don't think we'd let them build a wall that's 2 stories high.
Well, you're gonna put a fence. What if they put a 6-foot fence?
Don't we have a code that says you have to have windows on the entire side?
Well, maybe not a side wall.
Yeah, that's what that little illustration. I guess
Why don't you work on it?
it's unfair for me to talk because I was trained that a building has 4 sides. So, and there's no, kind of priority or.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't apply it to all 4 sides. And I mean,
I'll give you an example of that, of a corner lot. My house has a front elevation, and then it has a side elevation, which is a 2-story elevation. That's where the garage is. And when you're looking at that side, that's actually just 2 garage doors and a stucco wall. That is exactly what Neil's trying to.
and there's a house on Inlet K that's next to the Varga house that when you
Right, that's nice.
come out before you make the left on Inlet K to come to A1A, it's a brick house. And it's an entire wall just of brick, 2-story high.
I think that's the role of our commission. If that comes in front of us, we can make that.
So we recommended, but I think we ought to have in here
I
that,
think you'd have to get the percentage of fenestration. That we come up with a percentage, like we have, what is it, 50%, the maximum on the fenestration or glazing on a front.
do we have a minimum?
I don't think we have a minimum. I have a maximum.
Oh, you must.
Pardon?
Well, that'd be something you guys should bring up at your next meeting.
I just would like to be able to discuss
I
it and
think
bring it.
some towns have 50%.
I think it's even pushing back.
You have to have 50% of a glazed element.
And I would bring that even further and I would suggest that there should be also some sort of design element to the sides of a house. And I remember here on Coconut Lane 2 or what it is.
Yes.
That was built. I remember the discussion that you guys, again, attending these meetings. remember
David
the
Mark
discussion that you
mentioned
had,
the lack of
that
windows.
there was
on the
nothing
land.
on that side and
Yes.
it was a burden to the neighbor that had a view against that, that.
I believe the Hummel house here next to Jeff Eaters is the same on one of the elevations, on the side elevations. There's no windows whatsoever.
I think it's a good point to maybe come up with a percentage. You can't dictate where the windows are unless they're.
Right.
I mean,
That-
does it
that
always
dictates
have to
from
be
the house
windows?
inside.
It just has to be architectural relief.
Right, that's important, because what if
I'm not saying you have
mine's
to have
case,
windows.
the garage doors were on.
Right.
But if his house isn't any wider.
The
than
house
the
that
garage-
we-
But my house should have second story windows
had
to
that
make it look
problem,
right.
Because it had very sheer walls. Uninterrupted.
Thank you.
No, you can't
tomorrow?
do products, so don't do it.
And it's gonna be
Don't-
less
yeah.
square footage.
Thank you, Commissioner Rand. We are going to move on to number 3. We might have to be,
Can I just ask for clarification if there's consensus for the PNC to work on that?
yeah. And I think it's important because I believe that more modern and flat stone roofs really use that architectural non-feature right off there. Okay, number 3, we are moving on to pool location and retaining wall height. Clerk Armstrong, will you give us a little background on this, please?
So this item was brought up at the last town commission meeting. That there were some issues, and I used one of the examples that was brought up in the P and Z during their development review process for 113 Island, where their pool only has to be 5 feet. And in regards to the retaining wall, which is at about 9 feet, I want to say. So there was consensus from the commission to bring that up to this joint workshop to discuss it.
All right. So my recollection, and if you take a look, and I'm not, can you show the one that is the rear aerial perspective? I'm sorry, the southwest perspective, 06. No, to the left.
Upper left.
Upper left. There we go. So this was a site plan review that recently came to planning and zoning. And one of the things that caught their attention, I think caught everybody's attention, is because of the FEMA requirements for ground floor elevation being so elevated, the question is, do you put all your other accessory structures, whether it be a pool, a dock, a shed, a patio, at the usual base elevation, or do you also then have to raise everything up to the same height of where the building is? And this proposal was that the pool would be at the same elevation as that is required by the house, and in doing so, it created, I believe, a 9-foot retaining wall 5 feet off of the waterway. And they are at the end of a cul-de-sac here on this particular location, and a cul-de-sac in particular that has a lot of wave action because the waves come down at the end as larger boats go up and down the intercoastal. And would this size and this height of this wall then create a problem to the neighbors on either side? Because obviously the water would hit their retaining wall, but then it would have to go somewhere. And it's not going back in the intercoastal necessarily, it's probably going to go to the left or to the right. So I just thought it's something that we're going to have to deal with more and more often because of FEMA regulations of elevating houses. And it would be nice to try to get out ahead of this in terms of some type of codification or at least discussion to see, you know, at what point, you know, unfortunately it's forced on the homeowners to a certain point because of the elevation of the house. On the other hand is, you know, we look at a lot of irrigation and you have to maintain at least an inch worth of water on your own property. Is this a similar situation? Are you, if you're creating a problem for your neighbors? So I just give that as way of background. The other thing that I saw when I went and pulled our codes for swimming pools, section 64-42, it turns out, which I was unaware of, that if the swimming pool is located at or above finished grade, it is permitted in any front yard, interior or corner side yard or rear yard, provided that in no place it shall be closer than 5 feet from any side, rear, or front property line. And I thought, good heavens. So some of that I think is talking back to Member Kaczynski's statement earlier. I think if we leave doors open like that, that we're going to end up putting you guys in a very awkward situation at some point down the road. So I don't know if that ties into this discussion point or not.
Are you kidding?
I'd like to hear from us.
I mean,
Pool expert.
you have to, what you're gonna do is say, okay, well, we're gonna make the pool setback less off the property line. Motion Ridge is one of the few towns, believe it or not, that actually can allow a pool in the front yard. But 5 feet is critical because what happens is on the, especially the rear property line, you want to back the pool as far as you can to the back property line because of your lot coverage. So you want to back the pool all the way so your house can be 25 feet and you have enough deck so you can walk out of your door without having to walk into the swimming pool. This particular one though, what happens is because you're 5 feet off, the 9 feet doesn't come up from the seawall, right? So why didn't they just raise the seawall up? Or why don't we think about, rather than talk about messing around with the swimming pool, the 9-foot wall, why not look at the seawall height and say, if you're going to have to bring it up to a certain height, you have to bring your seawall up. So there's only a minimum amount of space from the deck, pool deck, to your seawall. So, I mean, because that's the difference there, walking all those down to that dock. So my point is like, rather than penalize them for putting their pool 5 foot off the setback, Why not say, okay, the maximum height from the deck to the seawall can only be so much? Why not look at that? Because no matter what we do, we're constantly impacting the neighbors, no matter what we do. Because when you go 9 feet, whether it's a pool or whether it's a house, like the house across the water for me, the guy's got 4 feet of the ugliest vinyl sheet poly you've ever seen with a cap on it, right up against his neighbor's property. And that's what the neighbor's looking at, plastic sheet pile going all the way down the side of his house. One complaint about that, I mean, I don't know what happened with that deal, but you're still going to run into that problem. And when that house gets knocked down, that house will get built up to that elevation. So no matter what we do with elevation, it's always going to be a problem with the neighbor, especially if the neighbor is, the house is built like mine in 1960, because I'm way low. So, but in this particular case, so rather than, because this is a unique case because of the size of the lot, it would be more of a, something that I would say, look, plus, how they get away with how the depth of the pool has to be a certain amount so that you can't climb out of the pool and literally fall the 9
Over
feet
the
down.
wall, exactly. That was
So,
my contention.
Yeah, because what happens is there's a code for that. So it has to be at least 48 inches deep there, all along that whole side, in order for you not to fall in or fall over. But why not bring up a different idea, rather than changing the codes on the heights of wall, change the code, or at least talk about changing the height of the seawall in relation to the height of the deck, so that the seawall gets raised up. Because you're gonna have to, I mean, this is, to me, is a perfect example of not wanting to spend the money on raising the seawall.
Well, our issue, if I may speak, was that wall functioned like a seawall, like armoring their property just by the width of the deck. And so.
No, that's untrue, because.
Well, that was, I'm just telling you, that was our concern, because that little deck where you see the chase lounges,
That's
is
not
so
the scale.
narrow that if you had a surge, that wall of the pool will act like a seawall and send the water to either side.
Right, so my point you just made, but first of all, your property line, here's your seawall. It depends on where your property lies on your seawall. Most property lines are literally on the inside of the seawall, or maybe the center. They're never on the outside, not never, very rarely on the outside of the seawall.
Sure.
In this particular case, and you still have a 5-foot setback. So your premise is a little off, because what happens is that pool has to be 5 foot off that property line. So you're talking about 5 feet. 5 feet's the width of this table. And what they did is, why not bring that, literally the seawall up to the level and reduce that space right there and bring the whole dock up. And then at that point, you can do what you need to do with your dock.
So may I interrupt, our building official put his card up, so can we hear from him for a second?
Yes, good evening, everybody.
Oh, I didn't know that's what that was for.
This is a very unusual lot. So Island Drive, that island is the one island that barriers the other islands from wave action. The major change to the scientific information that was used to decide the new elevations was actually wave action in the intercoastal areas. That was overlooked in the previous FEMA. This specific property has to have a finished floor elevation of 12 feet. That's the only area in the town, the barrier islands, that actually have VE zones.
Hold on. You're saying this house is 12?
Yes, it is.
The first floor is at 10.
Let me finish. It's very
Okay.
crazy.
I know part of the lot's at 12, but the house is at 10.
So at that point in the back, it's actually exposed to VE, velocity wave action at that point. Had it not been for legislation that came down in July of this year, that pool would have had to be at ground level. But because we were forced not to enforce or FEMA regulations, we had no grounds to push the owner not to do that. So we were kind of kneecapped. So what the contractor did, he took a line, and if you look at the plan, there is a obvious line that was drawn across the back of the house to remove the living portion of that lot outside of the 12-foot zone. So that's how we got them to 10. But it should be a VE zone, but we cannot enforce it because of the statutes that came out this year, pretty much kneecapping so many things having to do with building codes. We were roadkill this year. I have no idea what happened. So this is extremely unusual, but in a year, we will have the tools to deal with this. So I don't know if we ought to spend a lot of time putting in legislation that will become automatic in a year. The tools are there, we were just not allowed to use them.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, and I agree that, nobody has enough time to redo things that the legislation's gonna tell us what to do. But I do strongly suggest that we start to take a look at heights of seawalls. I agree 100% with Commissioner Pugh, because this is gonna become more and more, number one, it's one of our first armories for mitigating flooding and standing water, but if the legislation is not going to start to mandate heights, minimum heights of seawalls, it is definitely something that I think we as a town should look at.
So Jeff, would you have looked at something like stepping up? The seawall there is between 2.5 and 3 feet, I believe. You would have stepped it up 2 to 3 feet, taken the deck from the top of the seawall in that 5 feet, or?
Yeah, I would have taken, see where the
and-
grass ends on that corner? I'd take it up that high and that's where my dock would be, and then come around that.
But that guy's not on a lift, that means he's gonna use a ladder.
No, he's got a lift, see the two poles?
Yeah, I see that, but
Oh.
if he didn't,
Oh,
he's
he'd
gonna
be,
use a ladder,
yeah, but
which is his problem.
it is
But
what
I
it
don't think
is.
we
You
should
buy the
stop
lot, you
the
do.
discussion on retaining walls, because I get here, this is a special, unique case. that-
It's a unique case.
There's gonna be two
Right.
more. We just got an advertisement in the mail this afternoon, the 2 lots on Benito
Here you go.
on the corner that's
Yeah.
exactly like this canal, except there's going to be 2 lots that are going to be built.
IOD, yeah.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, while we're on the word wall, here's something that I think you guys need to look into, and maybe I'm wrong. Right now with the elevations, right? We retaining the 1 inch of water, which is what Christine referred to. Are people starting to put walls out their retention of their water? The drainage, not seawall, not seawall.
Sidewalk.
Right, so are we gonna end up at 10 years from now with a bunch of walls running all over town?
Yes.
So is that worth you guys studying to see if there's a solution to that other than all these walls? Maybe it's a giant swale?
Drain the ocean.
You're gonna be there, eh?
No, I'm not talking ocean water, I'm talking rainwater, but you have to retain your 1 inch. So that means we're gonna be looking at, going down the street, we're gonna be looking at 30, 40 walls in a row.
So I'd like
Well,
to-
once each house gets built up, the walls go away.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Bichelak, who's been very patient.
What I took away from this meeting when this particular property was discussed was that the one thing where I see a huge issue, I get the point on this, and it is a very unique situation, and thank God it's going to be addressed anyway. What I took away from this was that, exactly to your point, Steve, these retaining walls that are being built right now, and I built a retaining wall on my property in order to get a pool into my very, very tiny backyard. Thank God to the 5 foot. Because otherwise I wouldn't have had a pool. What I took away from this was, when I built this, I asked for clarification on the code. what is the code? And I was told you cannot have more than 6 foot towards your neighbor. And in my particular case, my neighbor's property is an older house, which sits exactly 2.5 feet lower than my own house, elevation wise. So we had to build a 2.5 foot retaining wall just to level out our property to get the pool in. And then obviously we wanted to have a privacy wall. Well, I couldn't go 6 additional feet of privacy wall because there was 2.5 feet already on her side that I had used up for my retaining wall. And in a discussion with Durrani, it came about that, or also at the planning and zoning things, that these retaining walls that we're dealing with right now for these 12-foot elevations, we're dealing with retaining walls that are going to be 5-6 feet tall. We're dealing with massive retaining walls. And then people want to have their privacy. Where do they put the fence, right? So, and the answer to that was all you need to do is step it right off. So visually, and this is where my objection comes in, or where we actually, what we should be looking at is, if you have a 6 foot or 5 foot or even a 4 foot retaining wall, should you be able to put another 6 foot fence just stepped off by 1 foot right next to it? It can be one of those vinyl fences that is 6 foot tall. You're still looking at a 10-foot wall. Should that be allowed, or should that fence then be stepped in by at least a good bit so it creates a visual effect of a step? Do you want to look at basically
Well,
as
you're ending up with what we were talking about earlier, a building, potentially a house,
having a massive
with
frontage.
no break.
Yeah, but you're gonna get that as houses get torn down and built, houses get torn down and built, and unfortunately, the neighbor is gonna have to basically suffer if you're the older house. And then that's the unfortunate, because of the fact that the person building a house has to go by a 10 to 12 foot FEMA regulation. But I think one thing you guys really should look at is when they have to build a wall. And if the wall is going to be now visible to the folks on either side over a certain height, it should be either stuccoed or it should be a concrete wall and not a vinyl, what's his name wall, so that somebody's not looking at, a bunch of plastic going all down the side of their house, because they build it right on the property line. So when you literally change the whole look of my house now, because now I'm looking at a plastic vinyl wall going right down the side of my house.
Think about the lot on Ocean that's being divided into 2, but both of those homes have to be elevated, and you've got the
Right,
homes
so at
on either
least
side of
if there's
it.
going to be an
Looking at the
elevation
back,
change,
looking
at
at
least
the
say,
wall.
okay, well, if you're going to have a
Yeah,
certain
exactly.
height, then the wall to your neighbor, then you would at least have it as a block wall. It should be stucco and painted, so you provide some, like a fence. You can't put a fence up that looks like.
Correct me, right now, the height of a wall is to the lowest point. And in most cases, that's.
Yes.
Yes,
Your
you're right.
neighbor, because they're, if you're improving.
And we also do have a requirement for that wall to be stucco. We also have a requirement that our wall be stepped back 18 inches to allow for 50% coverage by vegetation. That's what we have right now. So,
Yeah,
one
you
thing that
go look at them around town.
correct myself recently with regards to the berming or small retaining wall, I do believe we should consider having a carve-out to allow a maximum of a 30-inch retaining wall to basically build up the lots. Because the issue we're running into is drain fields have to also be at base flood elevation. So if the lot is not at base flood, you have to build up the lot. And of course, to utilize the lot and to get the separation that is required between potable water and other pool, etc. on your lot, the best design is to push your drain field towards the edge of your property as much as possible. And just to answer the question that Commissioner Pugh brought up earlier, eventually what's going to happen is when you have that row of retaining walls, eventually we'll raise the road to a new level, so those retaining walls will eventually be buried.
I think, Steve, your question, go to the end of Hudson, and look at what's going on.
So is it something that you guys want to take a look at, or is it just nothing we can do?
It's really a tough,
That's why I'm bringing.
I mean, for me, I'd love to see steps, you know.
Terrace, right? Yes.
I mean, that would, you know.
Yeah, you can. Who wants to walk out of
People-
it?
It's amazing what you can do. I mean, it was done in or is being done in New Orleans, and it's between the way you do your porches on the front of the house, and it's,
So I would like to suggest that
Different
it's
culture.
a robust enough discussion that we suggest that it go back to planning and zoning. And I like the terrace idea of you go and look at the new townhouses that are being built off of Brian Greenwood Boulevard, because they brought in such amount of fill, a 15-foot fill, they actually had to do terracing under two different walls. And it just visually makes it much softer, even though it's,
And they landscape the hell out of
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
absolutely.
So those are considerations when looking at these retaining walls. Maybe you can have a retaining wall up to 30 inches, and if you need another 30 inches, you gotta have an 18-inch setback to put, and you have to put something in it to go to the next level. I don't know, but I mean, that's something that.
Terracing.
Durrani, can that pool be lower than the floor elevation of the house?
Absolutely.
I mean.
So we don't have to have that blue portion of the wall anywhere near that height.
Well, the thing is, say you have
The back side of the pool that's closer to the house could be the actual bulkhead, correct?
you could, but see, the thing is that you don't want to come out of, I mean, the way that they designed it, was you come out of your door, you step one step down and you're on your whole patio.
I understand that.
It's
but
creating
this is
all the
not a
extra
perfect
steps.
lot. I mean, you've got to make compromises.
I mean,
Ronnie, I
it's-
didn't hear your answer. I'm
I'm just-
sorry.
if it were me, that's why I'd build. I would have built up my seawall though, and had less steps. 'Cause imagine carrying all your fishing poles and all the cooler and everything else up that steps.
I can just imagine a kid falling down.
Build the wall, build your seawall up.
I can't, I don't have a fishing pole.
So you were saying do they have to have that height? And the answer is no. Again, in a year, this came before me, and we had the FEMA regulation having to do with this structure being in a VE zone. You're not able to add fill or structure inside of a VE zone. So if you were using a swimming pool, it would have to be at natural grade.
Okay, but I'm asking for something in between. Do we have the latitude in the instructions that we have
I did
to
not
say
see
for
where we
compatibility?
could
I know it's,
Force him to do it.
pardon?
In our codes, I didn't see how we could force him to lower it.
Well, I understand under your metrics code. I'm talking about under our code of compatibility.
You could argue that that is.
I did at the last meeting.
Okay.
I will again.
Of course.
Come and speak, which is rare that a neighbor comes and speaks. And he was very concerned about the location of the pool and the height of it relative to.
Hey, imagine when you're building it.
But
Holy
can I just make one quick comment before our attorney turns absolutely blue? Because this might be a deferral or an appeal situation, we probably need to stop stop the discussion at this point and keep it at a very 30,000-foot level, talking just about heights of seawalls, heights of walls themselves, and elevations.
I just wanted to make one comment. We deferred this because the applicant wasn't ready. He wasn't ready.
Okay.
He wasn't ready. There wasn't enough information. So we said, bring it back. So that's pretty important to this case. We didn't say you can't do it. I think Durrani, I think it was.
Let's not talk about it.
Anyway, that's it.
That's your point here. The pool location, you guys aren't gonna go near. Retaining wall heights, including drainage retaining walls, whatever you want to call them. You guys are gonna take a look at that.
We're gonna try to promote stepping or.
Terracing.
But it's, again, how much area you have to work.
I mean, are we going to be trying to codify that rather than?
Trying to come up with something that attractive, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
That's gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We shall have.
Must. I only understand must.
Okay, well, Thank you very much. I think
Thank
today
you.
was very beneficial. I appreciate the collaborativeness of our discussions. And I would now like to call the meeting adjourned at 6:42. 5:42.
5:42.
Thank God.
Hour and 30.
Jeff, you didn't ankle bite enough.